I would never advise any company to eliminate any positions as of right now, even though they might already have AI tools and software before they start seeing the ROI. Once they start seeing the ROI, that's when we can evaluate the numbers. And it all comes down to understanding the business. For one company, my recommendation based on the data would be, okay, yes, you can safely eliminate this position and you can hire HR business partner. And then let's say you have this recruiter and the software, I mean, the AI app. And for another company, it might be, no, guys, you know what? I think for you, safely, that would be to keep this position and let's circle back to this amazing initiative in a year from now, because maybe the company is struggling financially.
Good morning, HR. I'm Mike Coffey, president of Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. And this is the podcast where I talk to business leaders about bringing people together to create value for all stakeholders. Joining me today to discuss building credibility in order to enhance HR's effectiveness in the organization is Lana Eyzips. Lana is a strategic advisor with Verleen HR, where she works with executive teams on people strategy, organizational health, multi-state compliance, and AI governance. Welcome to Good Morning HR, Lana.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you. And I probably will say Lana and Lana both, so just bear with me. I'll try to get it right. Tell me again which you prefer.
It's Lana.
Lana. Okay, I'll say it wrong every time now, so I've got
No
three
worries.
options. Okay, great. Well, I'll do my best. But we're in that time of the year where organizations are either finalizing or executing their strategic plans. And so let's start there. In a lot of organizations, HR is kind of an afterthought when it comes to the strategic planning process. Leadership comes up with their broad brush idea about where we're going to take the organization. Here's the mechanisms we're going to use to achieve those goals. They hand it to operations and tell them, well, y'all execute this and get help from HR when you need it. Is that what you see with your clients? And if that's kind of accurate, even, why do you think HR is not involved in those earlier conversations?
Yeah, great question. And Mike, you're absolutely right. It's this time of year when business owners uh, do the fun stuff, look at the budget, plan for the next year. And one would think that HR should be there at the table discussing all those amazing things. And you're absolutely right. Depending on the client, you might see some who do invite their HRs, and we can talk about it later. But majority of business owners, CEOs, do not feel a need to invite HR, and there is a reason for that. And I think it's not only HR's fault. I think it's both ways, but basically is because HR is being viewed as a firefighter, somebody who reacts to people challenges and incidents rather than proactively works on them. Rarely it is that HR really understands the business and can speak the language of business, can interpret the people behavior into business language. And uh, that's why business owners, C-suite, they just do not feel the need to invite that person. Now, I mentioned it earlier that sometimes I wish that would happen more often than not. HR is being invited, and that's because this HR probably positioned themselves as a trusted advisor. And we can also talk about it, what to do to get the seat at the table, and why it is important to have HR at the table.
Exactly. And it's kind of a catch-22 for a lot of HR departments. If they're seen as purely transactional, and
Yes.
that's the only thing you're asked to do in the organization, right? And you're not going to build that credibility about your business understanding and your ability to think strategically about how we solve our problems with people or through people. And if you don't have that you don't have the credibility because you not had the opportunity to exhibit it.
Yes.
How do you? It's got to be frustrating. So, and if you're not a big mouth like me, I never had that problem because I told everybody whether I was wrong or right what I thought. But I think a lot of HR people are probably more professional than me and a little bit more reserved about that. So how do you build that credibility if you're not getting the invitation to be part of the conversation to start with?
Yeah, great question. And I think this is like the cornerstone question for HR professionals. How do you build credibility? Mike, we use lots of buzzwords in corporate world like strategy, proactivity, getting the seat at the table, building the credibility. The answers to, and one might ask, okay, what do I need to do? I have this title, I'm HR business partner or HR leader. Now, how do I really get there? In my professional opinion, credibility is relational. It's not based on title, and you really need to build a relation from day one. It won't happen overnight. It won't happen just because you were hired as HR business partner or HR leader. And in order to build that credibility, you do need to possess certain knowledge in HR topics. You need to be able to consult and be like a true advisor. So this all starts from building this confidence, almost confidence, to be able to lead. So instead of asking, what do I need to do, or uh, waiting on what it is expected from you, to be done, you lead. So HR needs to change this mindset and start viewing themselves as advisors, consultants, professionals. In order to do that, there are multiple things that they can do, get the certification. I mean, it's not necessarily that you need to get MBA, which is pretty expensive, but you still need to develop professionally, expose yourself to different environments, talk to different businesses, talk to different business owners. And that brings us to next important uh, thing is to be able, not even to be able to understand business and to be able to talk the business language. The credibility builds on relations from day one, and it's not just what you say, how you say, the tone, the understanding, but also the understanding of the business. Let me give you an example. So let's say you have two HRs and you tell me which one you think is a advisor and a business partner. So you have this meeting where executives look at the budget and at the end of the year. And then they ask HR, okay, well, let's hear our HR department. And HR reports all the amazing things that they've done this year. And then the HR says, well, I noticed that we have a 20% turnover rate. Okay, everybody was paying attention, and then they like, well, 20% turnover. Then you have a next stage, a different HR who says all the same things, all the amazing initiatives that they rolled out in the past year. And they say, I noticed the data shows that we have a 20% turnover rate that resulted in almost 2 million loss in revenue. I think that the second HR definitely will get the attention of the C suite. So uh, understanding the business, speaking the language of business, having this inner confidence, not being afraid to share what you are able to pull with the data and metrics, translating it into the language that your C suite will definitely understand, or at least pause, at least listen. And this is how you build credibility. And also by asking right questions, thoughtful questions, instead of just, you know, offering a solution without looking into the cause
Right.
of the issue.
So, what would if you're a new HR leader walking into the
Mhm.
organization, what would you say my priorities ought to be for the first 30 or 60 days in my new role in an organization to really build that relationship and that credibility you mentioned?
That's a great question. I think if you are a new HR, and I remember those days being a new HR leader myself, I think back then uh, I was panicking because I knew that everybody expects me to really start creating impact from day one. And then I learned it the hard way, and now I'm, sharing it with your audience is, if you try to impress your employer by doing, multiple different things all at the same time, you're not going to get anywhere. An HR leader is somebody who first needs to understand the environment, the people, you know, uh, packing your day with with different meetings with your, department heads, managers, getting to know them, what it is that keeps them at night, what it is that their pain points, assuming that you have the baseline covered, which is you understand the business, you know the competitors, you can read the balance sheet and PLA, assuming that HR knows those things. So getting all the data. Nobody expects you within your first 30 or 60 days to roll over, initiatives. No. And it's not how it is supposed to be done in an ideal world. And then probably by the end of the 90 days only, you will be able to get a full picture, if not longer. The statistics tell us that managers are able to start working at the full power within first 6 months. Within, not during the first 30, or 90 days.
Yeah, there's getting the read of the room, building
Yeah.
those initial relationships, and maybe I know we sell widgets, but spending time on the manufacturing floor to see what's involved with really creating them, understanding what the resources that they need to do those, and what supply chain issues they have, all those kinds of things that what your internal customers are dealing with on a daily basis. Too often HR learns that after there's already a big problem. And there's no place that people like to take problems more than HR. And so when something's gone wrong, there's almost always people involved in it. And so they just show up at the HR door and, just hand us that broken employee and say, fix this. But, you know, I think that those are the two issues where HR, if we don't have the credibility, it's going to be really hard for us to succeed, is when we've got a compliance issue or we've got a culture issue, because HR doesn't create the compliance environment that's happening on, with the frontline supervisors, wherever they're making decisions, wherever they're directing their employees to do their jobs. And we don't create the culture. I mean, I think I see HR leaders who say they're amazing culture creators, and well, maybe they're co-creators, but
Hmm.
I think if you put that same HR leader in an organization that didn't value the same kind of culture he does or she does, is they're going to be a lot less successful. And all the ideas in the world aren't going to work unless your frontline managers are really living that culture. So I think we find ourselves in these situations where they're issues outside of our creation or control, but we're asked to fix them. And if we can't come up with something reasonable, it affects our credibility.
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. Though I can argue with you about the thought that HR doesn't create compliance. Uh, I truly believe that, first of all, compliance is culture, and I can explain it further.
Mhm.
And HR can create compliance if we're not talking, obviously, about the laws and legislature that comes with it. But so policy policy is the way the company communicates values. So
Mhm.
if you think about compliance as your, you know, employee handbook, this is how employer communicates their values. And HR should, no, I think HR must create or co-create, lead those policies, with one caveat. HR needs to feel the pulse of the organization to know what policies will stick. Because if we blindly take some templates or use AI
Mhm.
to help us create those policies, And I'm not talking about basic policies that just they need to be in the employee handbook, but really when employer wants to create a culture, not just gather people working together and pay them money, but really create a culture, meaning have people share the same values, be united, have the sense of camaraderie. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I think HR definitely needs to be part of it. And then it all comes back again to credibility. Without credibility, HR's voice might be, just the not heard.
Right. Yeah, I think that, and I think I may have overstated it, but yeah, that idea that yeah, we can write policies all day, and we can tell them, the frontline managers or our leadership, this is what the law says. But getting them to actually execute it, getting them to actually, to even follow our own ethical policies, our own policies about how we relate to employees, and we've all dealt with those frontline managers who had their own way of managing people that did not always line up with the way we wanted them to, the organization to lead and develop our people. And those are the ones who will kill your culture the fastest, no matter how much you're paddling the boat the other direction. So, but definitely we need to be those leaders in making sure those conversations happen and addressing and giving leadership insight into what best practices would look like, things like that. Um, but we get this compliance stuff, and um, a lot of times HR takes on the responsibility of saying no too often because of a compliance issue, and sometimes I see HR departments saying no because that's not how they've always done it, but they don't really have a strong business argument for the no. And other times I see they're saying no, but they're not providing enough context as to why. And so, talk about building credibility when you've still got to maintain that compliance.
This is such a fine line. It is such a challenging topic because here I think behavior, psychology, compliance, and business collide, and it creates such a mess. And if you really do not know how to untangle it with softness yet confidence, you might end up being in a situation when you know that there's absolutely no way that we can roll out this initiative or have this policy implemented or have this um, whatever it is that's happening. Um, I think what is important is for HR to be able, once again, assuming that HR has this credibility, or at least 10% of it.
Mm.
So once HR gets attention of the room, to be able to not only say, this is how we absolutely cannot do it, or this is the way we should do it, to back it with data, absolutely, because there is no other way. As I told you in my previous example with turnover rate and how we can tie it up to loss in revenue, the same comes with compliance. If you have a business owner who is not ready to invest in certain type of trainings that are mandatory for certain types of employees, let's say they're hired in a state of California, then you need to be able to tell this leader of all the risks. When you know the risks, it's just harder to say no, we're not doing that. And then it's always the tone. And why it is important is because HR is like a borderline psychologist of the organization. You really need to be able to understand what type of personality is your leader or the leadership team. Who are those people? How to talk to them. With some, it can be, pure data and just actions. With another, it can be a different approach. How you like actually the tone of your voice and what you do. With some it can be an email, with others it can be a full-blown presentation and an hour-long meeting. And it is important to read the room, to be able to back your answer with data, and to sort of engrave in the minds of your C-suite that compliance is not something boring. It's how we create culture. It's it's what we tell our people who we are as a company.
Yeah, and I think that's important because from an ethical point of view, if you want people to follow your ethical standards, you want people to follow
Hmm.
your policies, your procedures, and all that, and they see the organization on minor things that, oh, we won't get in trouble for this. So, but on those minor things, we're just cutting corners. We're not quite, really uh, completing all our responsibilities as far as compliance goes. I think that will affect your overall culture, and whether
Yeah.
it's a safety attitude that you want to have or just a straight compliance and integrity
Hmm.
point of view, or just living up to your values in generally. As soon as people see evidence that you're willing to slip on even minor things, then suddenly I think it chips away big time at your credibility dealing with those larger issues.
Yeah, 100%. And not all leaders realize that even one incident can trigger a chain of events. They might think that, well, this is just this one employee isolated incident. Well, people talk, and that's why you always need to consider the behavior and the dynamic within the team. And when you say no, you need to take full responsibility for the consequences. The same applies to a yes. Sometimes those same leaders want to make exceptions from the rules that they're created without realizing that people talk.
Right.
If you make an exception for some, just be ready that there might be another and another and another.
Yeah, and there's times where there's a business case for doing it, and maybe we don't even. It's a situation where we don't need to tell everybody
Hmm.
every time we make a change to policy. Everybody doesn't need to understand all our reasoning, and but there needs to be reasoning there. I think if you've earned credibility with your team over time, they know if you make a departure from a policy, there's a reason for it,
Yes.
and they'll trust you. But if it's just willy nilly on an ongoing basis, you can't be bothered,
Hmm.
or we just know, we make a little bit more money if we do it this way, even though it's not so compliant. That's where I think you really start to undermine uh, your team's faith in you.
It's an interesting topic because depending on where the organization stands, it can be a startup or we're talking about an organization that's growing. There can be different approaches. With startups, I always tell that HR needs to be fluid. HR needs to be able to adapt quickly, because the startup period is chaotic, and the company really needs to generate revenue. And maybe those words like compliance and policies might really trigger some anger from the C-suite because they really don't care at this point.
Hmm.
But if you do not lay the foundation at this very moment, then you can end up being a firefighter. And this is what AHR is being accused of more often than not. And then let's say if you have a company that's going through a growth period, well, we already have a culture in place. We already have people who, work for organization for years and years. And, then you might start hearing things like, oh, this company is not as it used to be. The leadership has changed and all this change. I don't like it. I'm walking away. And then you might start losing your top talents that you really don't want to lose. And this is where the real strategic HR starts. And without having this credibility, it's extremely challenging for an HR leader to make changes, influence, create impact, and do like the real HR work.
And let's take a quick break. Good Morning HR is brought to you by Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. Imperative is 27 years old this month. And since I started Imperative in 1999, our goal has been to help our clients make well informed decisions about the people they involve in their business. Unfortunately, most employers don't recognize the information gap in their hiring decisions until something goes wrong. There's a financial loss, workplace drama, reputation damage, or worse yet, someone gets injured or there's even a loss of life. And that's when they often find out that there's information out there about this person that they would have liked to have known before they put that person in a position of trust. And that's also when someone they trust sends them to us to help them clean up the mess and to avoid future bad hires. We'd like to help you avoid those situations before they happen and make truly well informed and legal hiring decisions. We're here for you at imperativeinfo.com. If you're an HRCI or SHRM certified professional, this episode of Good Morning HR has been pre approved for 3/4 of a recertification credit. To obtain the recertification information, visit goodmorninghr.com and click on Recert Credits. Then select episode 234 and enter the keyword credibility. That's CREDIBILITY. And if you're looking for even more recertification credit, check out the webinars page at imperativeinfo.com. And now back to my conversation with Lana Eyzips. Yeah, and I think having that business case is one thing that we saw, we've seen since the social justice movement that following George Floyd's murder, DEI became a big deal, and we were all talking about diversity. I had several episodes here about different topics related to that. And a lot of that, though, was diversity for the sake of diversity is the way it was portrayed, or as a social justice tool, rather than making a business argument for it. And there are people who say that you shouldn't have to have a business argument for doing the right thing as they see it. But changing hearts and minds is a lot harder than simply making an argument from a business perspective that, hey, we don't want to limit our ability to attract talent because of something that's not related to their ability to do the job. I mean, that's what diversity really boils down to, is getting, mitigating all those things that are just natural in our thing, but in how we view the world, and different people have different biases, and we've just got to recognize that. But how do we mitigate that? How do we get that talent in? And I think not making that business argument and not tying a hard number to it, which I think is feasible. Um, that's a big reason I think we're seeing what we're seeing with DEI, because there were a lot of things that didn't make business sense on their face anyway, and the argument wasn't made to support that very well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I 100% agree with you. This is a hard topic, a challenging one. When we talk about things that are on, you hear this words, you hear the DI initiatives everywhere, and at some point it becomes, I hate to say it, but it becomes sort of like a noise for companies,
Mm-hmm.
for some companies.
Right.
They want to just brush it off. They don't want to hear HR talk about it. They do not understand the importance of attracting employees, you attracting top talents in
Mm-hmm.
different categories, because it's viewed as something not important just because of the sauce that it is covered
Right.
with. And once again, the HR's job is to show the data, uncover things that are covered, bring to light those, you know, business, business related uh, outcomes that can come with certain initiatives,
Right.
and if we talk about the DI, that would be the DI.
I think you're right, and you've got an interesting method called the Lightbulb Method when we're addressing
Hmm.
organizational challenges, about a way that we can process them in a way that's you know affirming and, I guess, honest to our calling as HR professionals. I mean, the thing that got most of us into HR were the people, but still keep it business focused too. Once you walk through that light bulb formula, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I created this framework that I call the light bulb method. And the name kind of speaks to itself. I want HRs and leaders to have this aha moment when they have a challenge and finally they're able to, find a solution. Uh, you know, we in HR we talk about being strategic, and I always thought, okay, there's got to be a simpler way to answer the question of what it is like to be strategic when you are, let's say, a newly appointed HR business partner or HR leader who is really trying to make a difference. And I envision sort of like several layers that when you address them, when you see them, you're able to really get into the strategic mode. So instead of being a firefighter, you start seeing patterns. So once HR starts seeing a pattern, seeing patterns, that's when HR becomes strategic. So the first level of the light bulb is people's first. We need to always look at our people's as a first level, meaning to understand the behavior, the dynamics, to talk with people, to get a better understanding of all those intricate details of the behavior that drives their actions. The next level is, of course, data. You need to be informed by data. This is where HR can start pulling all the metrics, and look into all the accounting information and papers if needed, because obviously data helps us better understand. It's Data is facts. You cannot argue with facts. The next level is culture aware. And I think I've already mentioned it during our conversation is that uh, before coming to any conclusions or rolling out any initiatives, HR needs to be able to answer one simple question: will it stick? You might have an initiative that worked for one company, but it might not work for this. Even if you have all the data, even if you had all the interviews with all the employees, your business strategy is aligned with your HR strategy is aligned with business outcomes. You have your C-suite on board, but it simply won't stick because the culture of this company is different.
Mhm.
And then of course the final level is your actions when when you're ready to spell out your strategy in steps, and create consistency with your approach. So basically, if you imagine a light bulb with those levels: people first, data informed, culture aware, and actionable, this is how HR can, by using this framework, this is how HR can switch from being reactive to proactive. And you can literally unpack every people challenge through this framework, because people challenges in business, there are symptoms, and you can sort of diagnose them as Dr. House minus the sarcasm using this framework. It's been very helpful in when I share it with other HRs or you know business owners and leaders. They always say, oh, I've never thought that this one isolated incident that we needed your help with is actually a pattern and part of a bigger picture, and now seeing that, it helps us better understand. And actually, this is how you build credibility. So if you're an HR, aspiring HR, who really wants to be strategic but just doesn't know where to start, use the framework, use those simple steps. Talk with your people, gather data, analyze culture, and create actionable items.
And so the people first, that's kind of the industrial psychology that you bring to this, right? That this idea that people do things for a reason. Either they're incentivized or motivated to do it, or they're not appropriately motivated to do what we want them to do. And so it's not just a matter of just making people happy, right? It's just more about understanding what they respond to, why they're doing what they do, and then figuring out as an organization
Mm-hmm.
what's the business case for us changing their behavior.
Exactly. Yes. And as I said, HR is borderline psychologist. You cannot work with people without having at least basic understanding of people's psychology. And you know, your employees as well as your C-suite, the people, they are driven by whatever it is that's going on in their minds, and HR really needs to be able to read the room, and being open to hear anything. And then there comes this integrity part from HR that can balance out whatever it is that they heard. Then to be able to translate it in a policy that creates culture. So see, it's like
Mhm. It
a
all feeds
flow.
in, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if we always have, I always say companies tend to have two cultures: the one that they have on the wall, on the posters, and all of that, and then the real way things get done in the organization, the
Yes.
things that John Amici said that the best definition of culture is the bad behavior that you're willing to the worst behavior that you're willing to tolerate is where your culture really is at.
Yep.
And so, and like I said earlier, if our culture says that we undermine security or we undermine safety or compliance, then
Mm-hmm.
you're going to get more of that because that's what the system's designed to provide.
Yep. Or the culture can create fear, and people
Hmm.
can, it can look as if they're being loyal,
Hmm.
but actually they just simply fear of termination
Right.
or you
Getting
know,
yelled at, just having an unpleasant day with the boss. I mean, I
yes.
think a lot of people aren't worried about getting fired nearly as much as
Mm-hmm.
they just don't want to have another day of a boss, being angry or yelling or whatever. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's really expensive because you've got employees you're paying to be here all day. They're either covering themselves all day to make sure that you know they they don't get in trouble,
Mm-hmm.
or they're walking on eggshells to protect the leader's ego or whatever it is.
Yep.
And if you're going into an organization, part of the organization that has that environment, you need to understand that culture if you're going to try and help them solve whatever their issue is.
Exactly. And another example is that sometimes employees can fear talking with HR and bringing things to HR when HR is unapproachable, which kind of contradicts the whole point of working with people. It's interesting because I've heard it multiple times that in reality, HR is there to protect the company, and I can argue with that because yes, there are certain many um, situations where HR is there to protect the company, meaning protect the business,
Mm,
because without the business, no salaries are there to be paid, right?
right.
But at the same time, HR is also there to inform and educate and support employees, because without the employees, we
Mhm,
won't have the business. And that's another layer of the conversation is HR's approachability. So we can talk about HR being a strategic partner to business, and then we can talk about HR being um, a partner to employees and how to create the sense of, listen, my door is open. It's not just on paper, as you said it. It's not just something that we think we have, but my door is really open and you can talk to me, and you're not going to get yourself in trouble. So it's a balancing act of being a partner to business and a partner to your employees and juggling all those things all at the same time every day, day after day.
yeah, but I mean, it is listening to your employees, having them trust HR, knowing that there's a process in place when I've got a concern, I can follow it up. There's a business reason to do that. I want my employees to stay here. I want the good employees to stay anyway. And I want to make sure that they're as productive as possible.
Yeah.
And so it means when they see an obstacle to them being successful in their role, they raise it to their supervisor, they raise it to HR or whoever is appropriate. That's a pro business argument. And so I would still go back that HR is there to protect the business. But part of protecting the business is making sure your employees feel safe, that they feel engaged, they're psychologically safe, they're
Yeah.
physically safe, that they feel like the employer values their contribution,
Hmm.
uh, and they see their future in the organization someplace. And that's all to the betterment of the business itself. I mean, imagine the opposite: disengaged employees who don't care if they've got a job tomorrow or not. I mean, how productive are they going to be?
They're not going to be productive at all.
Yeah,
But
right.
I agree with you. In essence, it is protecting the business. If we look at it as a sort of like a triangle where we have business and then the company and the employees. So, of course, the business is what keeps us
Right.
running and it pays us money. But yeah, I think it's so just intertwined.
Right.
You cannot just say, oh, HR is doing this but not doing that, because we work with human resources, and human resources, it's part of the business. It's part of, part of why we're here today.
Well, and now that you mentioned that, it's probably a great place to end it because I mentioned in your bio that you consult with companies around their AI governance strategy, and so let's talk real quick because it wouldn't be an episode of Good Morning HR if we didn't at least talk about AI once. And so, what um, what do you think the future of HR is going to look like when we have a fully vetted, reliable AI infrastructure stack under us?
This is something that's on my mind every day, day after day. And I think the future, Mike, is going to be amazing. I'm not scared of it. I know that majority of people are panicking, but things are about to change. They are already changing. We will see multiple jobs just disappear. Is it scary? Yes, of course. But then we will see the automation of certain tasks that we would not be like, that is like a dream come true. For HR specifically, it means that we will get a chance to finally concentrate on the things that, um, on a strategy. So imagine spending 70% of your time on strategy and just 30 or maybe less on those manual tasks, administrative, transactional. I think this is for those HRs that are trying to position themselves as HR business partners or are already there having all the amazing knowledge and personality and like they're ready, but they're being buried with operational tasks. And I don't want to say that, that's not important. It is. But if you have your AI agents, your chatbots doing this thing for you, where you can just really get all the time from your day to create true impact, wouldn't that be amazing? I look at it from a perspective of, future belongs to technology, and AI is gonna reshape and is already reshaping the landscape. We need to adapt. Nobody is gonna die, but we're gonna have an augmented reality.
Yeah, and there are a lot of companies that are struggling with. Okay, we know we're going to implement these AI tools,
Mm-hmm.
and we know they're going to. We may need just one HR generalist instead of three of them when this is all said and done.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and from an AI strategy and AI governance point of view, what are you telling companies to? What are you suggesting they consider as they evaluate offsetting some of the labor that they have right now that they're using uh, as they look for ways to be more efficient by using these AI tools?
So the answer would depend on the company, the size of the company, how many HRs they have. Is it HR department or just one HR generalist? So there is no one answer that fits all. But basically, before we jump into okay, we're eliminating those three HR generalist positions, we really need to um, evaluate the need of uh, uh, implementing and purchasing this, HR, those AI HR apps, and what it
Mm.
is, what problems they can solve. And since it's just the beginning, it's so very new, even those companies that start implementing and start working, the easiest example is recruitment, because all those amazing AI apps are really just, it's mind blowing of all the amazing things that they can do. But it doesn't mean that you can, okay, like I'm buckling, AI is doing everything for me. You still need, because AI can, it can be biased still. So you still need a human being to, sort of oversee and sometimes review the things that those apps are doing. So uh, I would never advise any company to eliminate any positions as of right now, even though they might already have AI tools and software before they start seeing the ROI. Once they start seeing the ROI, that's when we can evaluate the numbers. And it all comes down to understanding the business.
Mm-hmm.
For one company, my recommendation based on the data would be, okay, yes, you can safely eliminate this position and you can hire HR business partner. And then let's say you have this recruiter and the software, I mean, the AI app. And for another company, it might be, no, guys, you know what? I think for you, safely, that would be to keep this position and let's circle back to this amazing initiative in a year from now, because maybe the company is struggling financially, reviewing the PLA and just looking at the numbers. But depending on where the company is now, it would be safe to say that at least explore your options. At least explore your options, and the ROI of purchasing AI app can be mind blowing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be a big investment. It can be a big return on investment
Mm-hmm.
if things go really well.
Yep.
And then you've got to decide, okay, yeah, we're going to turn these tasks over. That frees up maybe 70% of this other person's time.
Yep.
How do we use that person to the good of the business so that the things that they already know about the company, their investment, their goodwill doesn't go to waste. And so we can find ways to use it rather than hand them over to our favorite competitor and
Mm-hmm.
and lose that talent and that connection.
Exactly. It all comes down to retaining your top talent, but then I think companies and businesses need to understand that sometimes letting somebody go is okay. If
Mm.
this person is no longer serving the function that the business needed, it is okay. Maybe they will find their happiness somewhere else, and it can be your competitor. But if this exact employee just done their part, they contributed, and it's time for both of you to part ways, then it is okay.
So it goes, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, well, that's all the time we have. Thanks for joining me today, Lana.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you.
And thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please write us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening. And share this episode on your favorite social media platform. All of them do help us find more listeners. And we'd love to hear your thoughts at goodmorninghr.com. Good Morning HR is produced by Marianne Martinez and Paco Corral on Imperative's marketing team. The Good Morning HR theme music was created by Steve Pegler at HR Strategies of Texas. And I'm Mike Coffey. As always, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service to you personally or professionally. I'll see you next week, and until then, be well, do good, and keep your chin up.